Hello everyone and happy Sunday. Welcome back into another episode of Chop It Up Sports. We're glad you guys are joining us. Before we get today's show started, just want to give you guys a reminder to go check us out on Spotify and YouTube where our full episodes are recorded. So be sure to go check out that if you're more of a visual person and you want to watch the episode, especially if we have a guest on, whether it's Caleb Unger over at Quad Culture or my buddy Hunter Fullerton, no matter who it is, be sure to go hit that subscribe button and go check us out. On YouTube, if you're more of a listener and you want to tune in and chop it up on your way to work or, going over to someone's house, whatever it may be, just be sure to check us out on Spotify as well. And then for our shorter clips and little snippets and predictions, whatever it might be, we're on Instagram and TikTok. So really, wherever you social media, we're there. Be sure to go check us out. We got some good stuff coming up with March Madness coming in right around the corner. We got some NFL free agency and trade rumors. We're going to get into a little bit of that today as well. So be sure to go check us out wherever your social media. Drop a like, drop a comment on what you want to see. And we'll be sure to get to that. And we'd love to have more guests on the pod. So if you feel like you have enough knowledge of, really any sport, we'd love to pick your brain on that and have you on the show. So be sure to tune in, comment, like, subscribe, do all the things. You know the drill, guys. Looking at today's episode, we're going to be bouncing around the sports world. We got a little bit of NBA action that took place last night. We're going to address some rumors regarding my New England Patriots, hopefully getting a wide receiver here in the near future. And then we're going to wrap it up with some college basketball, bringing back the green light, red light segment that we all know and love. Just looking at, who I like and who I'm, a little bit skeptical of with the big tourney coming around the corner here. But nevertheless, it's going to be a fun one today. Let's start it off in the NBA. We had the Lakers and Celtics duke it out last night in Boston. The Celtics escape 111-101. I think this game looks a little bit different if LeBron doesn't get hurt there in the late third quarter. Boston goes on that big run to, open the lead to 15-20, and that pretty much did it for the Celtics. After that, I think it's really hard for a team, even with a Luka Doncic and a guy with his superstar potential. I think it's just hard for a team like that to come back when, your entire offense really in LeBron James goes out in the second half. It looks like he's going to be out for a few weeks, and so with that, you're going to see, a little preview of the future of the Lakers franchise where Luka's your main guy. Obviously, it's not going to be the same makeup of a team, but in a sense, you're going to have Luka and then you're going to have your role guys. And we're going to see a little bit of that over the next couple of weeks with Braun out. I think you're going to see a lot of flexibility at the wing positions. Obviously, Luka's going to be in command of everything there. But besides that, it's going to be really on these role guys to step it up. You're going to have Dorian Finney-Smith knocking down open shots. You're going to have to find a way to have an interior presence around the rim, and that's something we saw them struggle with last night against the Celtics team, who was really only throwing out Al Horford. So a lot of questions for this Lakers team. Obviously, we know they're really heavy at the wing position. I think they'll be fine there on both sides of the ball. I think J.J. Redick is a really smart coach, and he has a really good staff behind him in Scott Brooks and Nate McMillan. And so I don't think it's going to be a problem in terms of them being prepared. I just think logistically, like if your tallest guy is 6'9", 6'10", you're going to have a problem guarding the rim against teams like OKC or New York or Memphis. They're just teams that have big interior presence at the rim. And so for the Lakers, it'll be interesting to see the next couple of weeks kind of the shifts they make, how they adjust to having LeBron out. Because even looking at the game last night, LeBron was essentially the 5 from them the whole time. The broadcast crew with Richard Jefferson is talking about how, in multiple instances on the court, LeBron's the tallest guy for the Lakers. And I think, not to discredit LeBron, he can do essentially everything. But that's an issue if your tallest player and your best chance at some rim protection is a 40-year-old who's 6'9". Like, that's just a logistical issue. And that's something they tried to address at the trade deadline. I know the Mark Williams trade got all screwed up. But at the end of the day, the Lakers are only going to go as far as their rim protection takes them. And I know they have Luka, and I know they have LeBron, and those are two star-studded guys. And the way they play can obviously allow them to play a dark horse role in the playoffs. But at the same time, if they run into an Oklahoma City or a Memphis, teams that have Jaren Jackson, Chet, Isaiah Hartenstein, guys that can be effective on the offensive and defensive side of the ball, that's going to be an issue when you get into a 7-game series and you're just throwing jabs back and forth with these same teams in terms of scheming. That's just going to be something that is going to get attacked time and time again if you don't have that 7-footer who can stretch the floor and can rim protect. Obviously, they had that in Anthony Davis. They make the trade for Luka. And so even though I think it's a good long-term deal, I think it is an issue that is going to be, glaring for this Lakers team time and time again as the postseason gets closer. Looking at the Celtics, on the other hand, obviously a little bit of a sluggish start last night. LA gets up and down the floor a little bit. I think they lead the league in like 60-foot passes, the Lakers do. I think that's a really interesting stat, but obviously when you have, in my opinion, the two best passers in the game, in Luka and LeBron, things like that are going to happen. But looking at the Celtics, I think this is obviously a finals contending team. I'm not saying they're going to win it again. I'm just saying when they're at their best, they're really hard to stop. And I didn't even feel like they were at their best yesterday. Looking at it, they didn't knock down the open threes that they typically do, at least early on. But what stands out to me about this Celtics team is that their role guys, like Peyton Pritchard and Derek White, really seem to elevate to the level of their star powers. Last night we saw when Jaylen Brown gets going and he gets to the rim and Jason Tatum is knocking down contested threes, the role guys kind of seem to ride that wave as well. If Derek White and Peyton Pritchard are on fire at the same time that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are being aggressive, that's a nightmare for NBA teams. And that's why they won the NBA Finals last year, just because of the depth that they have at these different positions in the backcourt, being able to score with so many different guys and just give you those different looks. Al Horford apparently is still really good at basketball. Never would have told you that in 2025, that Al Horford's still going to be an effective center, but I thought he was awesome last night. I thought that his rim protection, even his defense on guys like Luka at times was weirdly good. And I think of this Celtics team, obviously Kristaps is out right now, but when he gets back, you're going to have two strong interior presence with Horford and Porzingis. And I just think that this is a hard team to stop. They're deep at every position. They, are kind of more in this modern NBA of we're not going to have necessarily a true point guard. We're just going to throw a bunch of wings at you, and we're going to attack you from all angles. We're going to get to the key. We're going to get to the three-point line. We're going to get to the free throw line. And ultimately, that they can just beat you in so many different ways. I think a lot of credit has to go to Joe Mazzulla. I think he's an absolute psychopath. But at the same time, he has his guys playing good ball. I know the Celtics haven't been perfect this year. They definitely aren't as good at home as they were last year. But at the same time, they're going to get home court advantage in almost every playoff series they play in, especially if they can find a way to sneak up and get that one seed. No one wants to go to Boston in April or May or June and try to go win a Game 6 on the road or a Game 7 in Boston. No one wants to do that. And so as the Celtics continue to play their brand of basketball, get their feet back, and just find their rhythm after kind of having a sluggish start in the midseason, I think that they're going to be a really tough team in the playoffs, and that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. But, yeah, I think the Celtics are legit. I thought it was a fun game last night. Obviously, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, the Lakers are screwed and the Celtics are going to win the finals. It was a Saturday night game. Sure, it had a lot of meaning. It's fun to see those two teams go at it no matter what the circumstances are. But at the same time, it's like, let's relax a little bit. But I think, just in the NBA as a whole, I know we see other sports like college basketball really take rivalries too far. It seems like no matter how good Duke or North Carolina is, that's always going to get really hyped up to be a primetime game. But in the NBA, I think it's okay to go back and rely on some of your tradition to promote your product again. We've talked about this on the show multiple times. The product of the NBA just hasn't been what it should be or what it has been in the recent years. And I think, going back and really promoting these Lakers-Celtics rivalries or these West Coast showdowns like OKC and San Antonio, I think it's okay to kind of bring back some of that nostalgia. Obviously, you don't want to overdo it, but I think, going back to your roots, going back to what makes this league so prominent and being able to have a Lakers-Celtics competitive rivalry for years to come. I mean, Jason Tatum's not going anywhere. Jaylen Brown's not going anywhere as long as Luka stays intact in LA. This is going to be another chapter of the infamous Lakers-Celtics rivalry, and I think as NBA fans, that's something we should be really excited about. Let's stick in New England here for a minute, or at least in the Boston area. If you're a Boston sports fan, this episode is definitely for you. We're going to be talking some New England Patriots. It was rumored earlier this week that the Patriots are in the mix to get star receiver DK Metcalf from the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks organization is essentially imploding in a sense. I'm not going to say that they're completely out of, making some offseason moves to get their feet back, but all within a week, they trade their starting quarterback, which I'm not saying, Geno Smith was like the say-all, end-all for them. I'm just saying that was their starting guy, and now he's not their starting guy. So Geno Smith is gone. Tyler Lockett, they cut ties with him, Really sad to see him go. If you're a Seattle Seahawks fan, obviously spending his entire career in Seattle up until now. And then within 24 hours, DK Metcalf, requests a trade away from the Seattle organization. And so the Seahawks team has really imploded in the last week. I'm sorry to all my Seahawks listeners. I know as a West Coast guy, most people are Seahawks fans, but it's a tough break. However, this does benefit my New England Patriots, an organization that has been dying to get a star wideout for years, honestly. Even when Brady was in New England, this was a team that was never really reliant at the wide receiver position just because they had guys like Edelman and Amendola and Wes Welker early on. I know they had Randy Moss for a couple years, but we didn't even win a Super Bowl with him. So how much does that really count? Nevertheless, this is just a team that has a young quarterback. He's going to be really good as long as they take care of him and they do things the right way. And getting a guy like a DK Metcalf in there, I know he can be a hothead at times, but just getting a deep ball threat down the field, a guy that can, vertically stretch the defense and allow other young receivers like a Jalen Polk or a Demario Douglas to get open underneath and kind of just expand this offense a little bit. I think it's critical that the Patriots get a wide receiver this offseason. And the reason I say that is just because you bring in a new coach with Mike Vrabel. We just talked about Drake May being able to take that next step as a quarterback. And I think what you can really do is compare this to a Houston Texans team that we saw hire DeMeco Ryans, and they bring in C.J. Stroud. And as C.J. Stroud is developing, they get Tank Dell, they get Stephon Diggs, they get all these guys at the wideout position that really help expand the defense and just make life easier on a young quarterback. And for Drake May, a guy that has shown that he can still be productive with a terrible offensive line and a mediocre at best wide receiver core, I think being able to bring in a guy like DK just takes him to that next step. Now, with that being said, I'm not saying that they're going to go out and give the Bills a run for their money, or we're going to go out and make an AFC championship as long as we get DK in. But it's a step in the right direction, and it shows your fan base that you want to be aggressive, that you still are pursuing those Super Bowl standards that Robert Kraft always talks about. If we're going to talk all this talk about, we're going to be aggressive, we're going to get star-studded guys in the draft, we're going to go out and pay money to big names in free agency, and then you're not going to go out and trade when DK Metcalf is on the market and he's really the betting favorite to go to your team right now, then that's just, you're just lying to your organization. So you have to be able to back up what you're saying, make a productive move like this. And I really hope they do bring in DK. And even if it's not him, there's still guys on the market that are just as productive. We've seen wide receivers move around already in this offseason, whether it's Debo. We talked about Tyler Lockett getting cut. Cooper Kupp looks like he's going to be on the move this summer. There's so many guys that, maybe on the latter end of their career, like a Debo or a Cooper Kupp, that can still be productive. And so even though I'm not, opposed to bringing in, a 30-plus-year-old Cooper Kupp who might be on the back end of his career a little bit, bringing in a younger receiver who can just do so many things like DK Metcalf would mean an enormous amount to this organization. I think he would take him to the next step. And it's really exciting as a Patriots fan right now because for years we had the Mac Jones experiment, and that just didn't go the way we wanted to. I don't think, people like to blame Belichick, people like to blame Mac. I think it was just a little bit of everything. I think Belichick was a little outdated in his scheming. I think that Mac Jones really just isn't that good of a quarterback, and that just made for a disaster case scenario. It also doesn't help when Matt Patricia, a real defensive guy, is calling your plays offensively. I think that, it's not going to help any young quarterback's development whatsoever. But new coaching staff, young team, there seems to be some excitement. New England has draft capital this year, which is something they really haven't had a lot of in years past. They have the second-round pick at number 38. They have 2 third-round picks. Obviously, we know they have the 4th overall pick in the first round. And so there's ways that you can kind of maneuver those picks and go trade for a star receiver. Or you can draft guys that are going to be surefire studs and develop those. I would like to see them be aggressive. I wouldn't be opposed to trading the second-round pick if you're bringing in a star-studded guy. But I don't necessarily want to see us give up a second-round pick and move back for another third and go draft another punter out of Boston, Mass. I think those days are over. I think it's time to be aggressive, draft the big names, or trade for the big names that have already been established as stars in the NFL. But nevertheless, I think the Patriots are on the up and up. I think it's time to buy some stock in them. And I'm really excited to see the moves that get made once free agency opens, and just how Mike Vrabel and Robert Kraft are really able to work together to bring in a big name back to such a prestigious organization such as my New England Patriots. Before we get out of here, and yes, it is going to be a little bit of a shorter episode today. Obviously, being a student athlete, got a lot of stuff on my plate. And like I've mentioned, just kind of an awkward time in the season. Not a ton going on that really has a lot of importance. Obviously, as the tournament gets closer in college basketball, we'll cover that. But for now, I'm just going to give you a little green light, red light, who I like going into March, who I don't really love going into March. And to be fair, there's 3 green lights, there's 3 red lights. And I want to preface this by saying this is strictly off of feel and just what I've seen in the last couple of weeks. For those watching this, the conference tournaments haven't started yet. And so really any of these teams can make noise or even lose stock in the next week or two. But nevertheless, just based on what I've been seeing in the last week, this is how I feel about these teams. My first green light, I have the Blue Devils. Actually, it's the Duke Blue Devils coming in as my first green light. I think that Duke is a legit championship contender, and that's pretty easy to say when you have Cooper Flagg, who is hands down the best person in college basketball right now. They just put a pounding on North Carolina last night against a Tar Heels team that really needed that win at home to help secure a spot in the tournament. I don't really think they're going to get in at this point, but Duke, looking at this team, they're complete, and that's being said with the injuries that they're facing. I know Tyrese Proctor hasn't been healthy. They've had some bigs that haven't been at full go this season. And so even with that, having a guy like Cooper Flagg is going to put you in any game that they have. I think John Shire really has things figured out there at Duke. I think that no matter who this team faces, whether it's in the Elite Eight or the Final Four or even the national championship, they're going to have the best player on the floor at all times. And now that doesn't say that you're going to automatically win games, but when you have a guy who is just head and shoulders above everyone else on the floor, that just makes you that much harder to beat. And so I think looking at Duke, this team is star-studded. They have the perfect combination of really young, top-heavy talent and also experienced guys who have been in this situation before. They lose Jeremy Roach in the transfer portal to Baylor before the season, but you have Tyrese Proctor, a guy who's been around for a bit. He has that tournament experience. And for that reason, I really like Duke to make some noise, not just in the ACC tournament, but I think they might be at the top of my list for national championship contenders. Now, moving on to my first red light, I have the Purdue Boilermakers. This team just seems to be trending in the wrong direction. They've dropped a couple games in the last week. I just don't love where this team's trending. I know they made the national championship last year, and I don't want to discredit Matt Painter and the type of coach he is, because I do really think that he is, one of the better coaches in college basketball. But I just don't think this Purdue team has lived up to the hype this season. They've dropped some games that they maybe necessarily shouldn't have. They're sitting at 20-9 right now going into the Big Ten. They've lost 4 out of their last 7 or 8. They had 4 in a row, losing to Michigan, Wisconsin, Michigan State, and Indiana. Not to say that those are bad teams necessarily, but those are the type of teams that you have to beat in March. And so for them to lose those games in late February and earlier this month, it's just not a great sign heading into the tournament. I still think that this, Boilermaker team has full potential to make a Sweet 16 run, maybe the Elite 8 at most. But I just think they have some problems. I really question some of their guard play. It seems to be inconsistent in my opinion. And so for that reason, I would tell you guys to be wary of the Boilermakers in your brackets. And it's just not a team I would take very far. My second red, I cannot talk today. My second green light, I have Alabama. And that is shocking considering the fact that they just dropped 2 games in a row before yesterday. But Saturday they went into Auburn and took down their rivals, the number 1 team in the nation, the Auburn Tigers. This was a game that, when you get to rivalry weekend, a lot of the logistics, a lot of the rankings, all that stuff goes out the window because you truly do just get 2 teams who absolutely hate each other, 2 fan bases who despise one another. I've never spent time in Alabama. I've never spent time in the South. But as a college sports fan, I can speak on the fact that when you hate another team, when you hate the person across from you, there is a sense of, logistics and statistics that just goes completely out the window. It's all about pure hatred and emotion. And when you get 2 really good teams, I know Auburn is probably on a different level in Alabama, just in terms of being the more complete team. But Bama proved that they can beat anyone. And when you go in to the number 1 team in the country's house and you beat them down in the last regular season game, That's a huge momentum shift for an Alabama team that's really struggled this year. Mark Sears hasn't had the season that a lot of people were expecting him to have. And despite that, I think that this is still a team that can make some noise in a tournament. They play fast. They can shoot the ball well when they're playing the right way. They can get stops on defense. Grant Nelson seems to be Mr. March. He had a huge run for them last year. He had some great plays down the stretch for them as well yesterday. And so I think Bama's a team to look out for. Now, I still think, I would lean Auburn and maybe Florida before Alabama, but I still think that Bama's a team to be reckoned with once we get into the tournament. My second red light, I have the Michigan Wolverines coming out of the Big Ten. They've just kind of fell off the map. Last time I checked before we started recording, they were getting beat down by Michigan State in East Lansing. And, and this is a team that started out, you get Dusty May coming in. I believe this is his second season there in Michigan and Ann Arbor. But I just don't love the way this team has been the second half of the season. I thought they started out really well. They had some big wins. And now it just seems like they've kind of lost all momentum. They've had chance after chance of getting that big game, that big win, whether it was Illinois coming to town or whether it was the game today against Michigan State. And I just think that, this team's not quite there yet. I think Dusty May still needs some time to get the guys he wants, develop his program a little bit more. And this team has just been really trending in the wrong direction. I wouldn't be surprised if they're an early out in the Big Ten tournament as well. Obviously, they'll make the big dance, but once they get in, I think they could be prone to an upset as well. So not super hot on the Michigan Wolverines right now. My final green light, the other team in the state of Michigan, is the Michigan State Spartans. I think Tom Izzo is having one of the best coaching performances of his career this season. I think that he's been money. He's got his guys playing the right way. My one criticism about Michigan State is that they do lack a little bit of a true point guard. It doesn't really seem like they have that one ball handler that can control the pace of the game necessarily. But at the same time, they have some dangerous wings. They're fun to watch. They fly around the court. Cohen Carr is one of the most exciting players of all of college basketball. His ability to get to the rim and get steals on the defensive end is something to be said. I think that, as this Michigan State team makes a run in the postseason in March, I think this could be a Final Four team. If they get the right matchups and if they play the right way, I like Tom Izzo and his tactics versus almost anybody. And so as the Big Ten tournament takes its course here in the next week or so, as we get in to the NCAA tournament, I think Michigan State's a real contender this year. I mean, last year we saw Tom Izzo in that post-game press conference saying, I'm going to make a deep run in this tournament or I'm going to die trying. And he's came back just a year later, and he has one of the best teams that he's had in recent memory. I think that this team is dangerous. Their ability to be flexible on the defensive side of the ball, their athleticism on offense, I think really elevates them and can be a problem for teams in the tournament. So look out for Sparty in March this year. My final red light before we get up on out of here is the Kentucky Wildcats. Mark Pope, I'm a big fan of his. I actually really like the way he coaches games. I think he has a quality roster. And to be fair, it's not easy taking over a Kentucky program that was pretty much left in ruins after John Calipari left. Kind of shocked the Wildcat fan base there in Big Blue Nation. And listen, Kentucky could make a run and make a Sweet 16. And would I be surprised? Probably not. But if they lost in the second round again, would I be surprised? Also probably not. I think that, just looking at the way this team's been playing the last couple of weeks, I think it's something to be said. They've had some tough losses in close games. So I think they've shown that they can play with the big names in college basketball, but I don't necessarily think that they've shown that they can beat them. Not to say they don't have some big wins on their schedule, but I just think when you get to March and you get in these close games, Kentucky's been a team in recent years that can't find a way to win the big ones, especially when they're on upset alert and they're playing these smaller seeded schools that really have nothing to lose. I mean, even looking at Mark Pope last year, he had a really good BYU team heading into the tournament, and they lost in the first round. And so I think as Kentucky gets into this tournament, depending on where they get seeded and what their first-round matchup looks like, they could be an early out once again in March. And I know my Wildcat fans don't want to hear that. That's just the way I feel about it. So with that being said, that is going to wrap it up for today's episode of Chop It Up. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Like I said earlier, be sure to drop comments. We're going to be covering all types of sports. We got March Madness coming up in a week or two. We got the NBA playoffs coming up here in about 2 months, I think. Obviously, track and field's getting underway. We're going to keep you guys updated on the latest news coming out of track. And then just as the summer progresses, we're getting closer to the dog days of sports, unfortunately. So whether that means scheduling looks differently or we're putting out different content, we'll be sure to keep you guys in the know. But for now, just like, subscribe to the channel. Be sure to let us know your thoughts, comments on the video. Who do you like in March Madness? Who do you think the Patriots should sign? Should the Seahawks try and bring back DK? Whatever you think, just be sure to drop us in the comments. And we love to interact with you guys, so be sure to let your voice be heard. But for now, that is going to wrap it up for today's episode of Chop It Up. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we will catch you on the next one.